Oh my gosh, hi, my name's Dan Milano. I'm the co-creator, co-writer, co-EP of Greg the Bunny, and I also play Greg and Warren.
Yeah!
I'm Seth Green, that's the back of my head.
That was my head, and this is Victor Yerrid, Tardy the Turtle. My head was actually in the opening shot when you see Tardy graduating.
That's me mooning everybody as Count Blas, Drew Massey.
That was funny, actually, that day with us, like, driving on the street there.
And that big human being there with 4 or 5 chins, Bob Gunton, as Junction Jack.
As James Murray, I was the nut.
That's true. That's very true. This is Sock Like Me. This was the second episode that we shot, written by Matt Silverstein and Dave Jesser, dealing with, first episode it was kind of the sequel to the pilot where we were sort of setting up the puppet human condition in society and the fact that the puppets were an oppressed minority.
I have to go to the bathroom.
Jimmy, why don't you go with him, make sure he doesn't fall in again?
This is Eugene Levy. I'm not able to be here today, so I'd like to tell you a little bit about my personal life. I'm doing a movie with the Olsen twins right now.
For you. Big Bird says, "Kid, don't you know I'm a puppet?" And Kid says, "Oh, don't worry, Big Bird. I'll say it slow."
This is the beginning of Jack's puppet racism, which he's not really interested in hiding. And this was an interesting episode because we're still trying to find all the characters, especially for the human cast. And with Jack, the idea was that, you know, when the camera stopped rolling, he was just really gruff and unhappy, and that he had a problem with the puppets. And I think the studio felt after testing that the conflict was perhaps too aggressive, which is odd because conflict makes for good comedy and drama. But they just felt that maybe he was too harsh, and so we actually tried to pull this back a little.
And the thing is, we had built into Junction Jack a reason for this. I mean, this is a damaged Vietnam veteran, and in my mind, he was always like fighting for the low end of the turf, and so that put him in conflict with the puppets.
And of course, the personal reasons he had, having lost his mother to a puppet.
That's right. He was a very damaged human being, a divided human being.
I had no idea the show was so deep.
This is actually Victor performing Greg at this point. He did all the bathroom scenes.
Yeah, for some reason, Dan, whenever there was a scene in the bathroom, Dan asked me to to do Greg.
I don't do bathroom scenes.
Is it a phobia, or you just don't like them?
I don't like phony bathrooms, and that's the thing. It was a set. I wanted to go to a real one. We couldn't work it out.
I heard that Ernie and Bert are actually straight.
Oh, it's so funny, though, because early on, it's all these jokes about other puppets and, like, dissing them and talking about the reality of all the other puppets. We kind of got away from that.
Sure, nothing that scared, baby.
Who shot this episode at Sarah's thigh level?
This was directed by Mike Mitchell. I'm sure that shot was requested to sell the joke, of course.
No, I didn't, Alison. I was making television. I didn't have time for my usual 9 o'clock urinal patrol.
Now, it appears I'm drinking some coffee in the background in this shot.
Clearly waiting for my turn to say something incredibly funny.
I actually like to improv quite a bit during the scenes. There I just looked at my coffee, which was not in the script originally.
I had to exhibit distaste with the coffee. And
Hysterical, right? Eh?
So sock is introduced as a term. I don't know why this episode didn't air right away. I think it aired last and possibly didn't air at all in the first run. They became very sensitive suddenly about it, and I thought it was one of the better ones because it sets up the relationship between Gil and Alison. It lets the whole cast interact and sets up puppet politics.
Oh, there's Susan.
There we are.
Mr. James Murray in the suit.
And the sweatsuit.
And Susan's also gone, right? She was stolen with Tardy.
Susan and Tardy were both stolen,
Yes,
missing
been
in
held
action.
captive.
Somebody absconded with a couple of our stars.
They're in storage.
Somewhere a Fox executive or someone probably has their heads on the wall.
Hey, look at me. I'm Susan the Monster. I work at Fox. Hooray!
James is particularly heartbroken about that because he loved getting in that costume
That was
so
like your
much.
favorite thing to do.
Loved
Fun.
putting
Was that
on
a sweat
Susan.
box?
Very much so.
Getting into that costume and being hit by a car, James always said were his favorite things to do.
I did, but I meant it respectfully.
That is the puppet that was featured in an episode of Just Shoot Me, and Stephen Levitan was very happy to have gotten him on loan.
Blah. You know, people, if you don't put your names on the bottom of the paper, I'm not going to know who wrote them.
That one was mine, blah.
I was kidding. I know it's yours. We're all aware of your ridiculous verbal tick.
Hey, blimey.
Hey.
You can hear the crew laughing almost in the back of my mind. There's a cut sequence here that I think is on the DVD of Dina and her handwriting being on the men's room wall for completely different reasons. And one of the reasons that was cut is that notes came back that they didn't like the more promiscuous side of Dottie, who was originally conceived as somebody who was very wholesome on the show, but behind the scenes she was kind of like, trying to make a name for herself, had a punk band and everything, and that kind of changed when we cast Dina and started rewriting.
Looks like your handwriting, doesn't it, Blah?
Well, I don't think they match.
You gotta admit, Jack, it looks pretty similar.
Oh, I get it. It's another damn puppet conspiracy, like covering up Oscar's mob ties? Come on.
I always loved the Sesame Street references that they would
we were all
throw
over
in
that
from time
show.
to time.
I tell you, either I'm stinking drunk or that was the world's worst apology.
Well, seeing as it's almost noon, I'd say it's a toss-up.
Had a few of those in there. That's where the mixed tone comes into play. You got sort of these very character-driven scenes that were very... we tried to be naturalistic, and then there were other scenes that were very sort of set-up punch.
That needed rim shots.
Well, that's one
Bob
way.
Gunton, the fiercest man in overalls you'll ever
I
meet.
should have kept that costume. It does wonders.
What happened to it?
Hope someone burned it.
You scary man. You're about to cast him down with the sodomites here, I believe.
It's a similar camera angle, I have to tell you.
Greg was particularly obtuse in this episode, if I remember.
The camera angle is actually a good technical point to make, that it is one of the rare times that we got down on the puppet size level and looked up at the actors, which was a much better way to shoot the puppets and make them seem large. There were a lot of complaints that the puppets looked too small, and that was because we oftentimes had 3 cameras going at once, and in order to block puppets for 3 cameras, it was nearly impossible, and it required a great deal of wide shots that hid the puppeteers. Where shots like that are sort of low and close to the puppets, I think would have been better overall if we had done more of that.
Everybody's really pissed, especially Jack.
I just realized in this close-up, too, that Greg has his button eyes here, Dan.
Right. The first 5 episodes that we shot had the buttons, and we took a brief hiatus to sort of retool the show, and the notes came back to give him eyeballs, which was an ongoing issue.
Hey, would you do me a favor and get your bunny head out of your bunny hole?
Another classic.
For a second.
That was a line replacement. The original line was, I never told my dad that I poked holes in his condoms. Or I never told him or my little brother.
Oh, my little brother, yeah. There's a lot of weird obscure stuff in the show.
Enough. Jack, we have a show to do, and the puppets are refusing to work unless you apologize.
Oh, this is the Tardy the Turtle episode.
This episode does mark Tardy's first appearance.
Yeah, when we went back and we shot the pilot for the 43rd time, I think, they added Tardy back in. So he does appear actually in the pilot, but this was the first time we'd ever seen him.
That's right.
First thing we shot with him.
Yeah, I'm with you, Jack.
His voice is a little different, and I think he's a little slower.
You can just see everybody trying so hard not to laugh, because we were playing around with Tardy all day, and when it finally came time to actually work on a scene, it was just, we were all hair trigger on the laughter.
when we talk about the time that Dina Waters, who had such intense concentration on the
Oh,
set.
yeah, she was fierce.
She's a rock.
This is the upcoming is the take where she finally broke.
She broke bad.
And it was because Tardy was just talking in between takes and just ramping up and making everybody so giddy.
There's me giving you a juice box. I'm still
parental
babysitting you.
That's right.
I don't want to finish shooting the Tardy Turtle song today, okay?
There he is.
So the reference was Tardy Turtle. The joke was that he's
always
late.
late.
Matt Silverstein created Tardy, and the idea it was that when everyone storms out, Tardy is, of course, the last one.
But watch Dina and how well she covers this.
I just said it to get him to apologize. Come on, guys, you know me. I love puppets. Gee.
There's Sweet Willie in the back.
Sweet Willie.
Poor guy.
Sweet Willie is another puppet that cracked everyone up between takes, but never got his moment.
Didn't get his due.
No, he
Never
get a
had a
contract
line.
for season 2. There's Dina.
She's laughing so hard.
That's great.
It's a quality cover, though.
Oh, Alison, please. I think I'd remember if you asked me to check Jack for a wire.
You know, we can go.
Yeah, a lot of the characters that started coming out were guys we just played with behind the scenes, like Sweet Willie and Cranky and Mr. Hygiene.
What became ironic was that the show is supposed to be a look behind the scenes of a puppet show, and was originally conceived as much more of a Larry Sanders or Curb Your Enthusiasm, sort of an improv free-form feeling. And then the show got a little more structured, but behind the scenes of us actually making this was the real show. I mean, that's when the puppets would just go off and interact with the actors.
Did Tardy's neck get a lot shorter?
This was actually Carl Bridge, I think, who was one of our wranglers on the show, was doing Tardy in this scene. And the neck sleeve wasn't pinned in, so it was really long. And he was doing this funny thing where every time the Dr. Aben Mitchell would shout, he would pull it back down into the shell. And I think it's the only time we ever did that, but it's a very long-necked
Mr. Drew
Tardy.
Massey.
You know what they say about a turtle's neck?
Oh, yeah.
Is that you and James both, Drew? Is that you guys together?
I think that.
Yeah.
Is that you, James?
Doing the arms
It
dance.
is, yeah.
So, what is anti-puppetism? And how does it affect the workplace? Let's watch and learn.
I thought these examples of puppetism were really hilarious.
Yeah. That's Victor Tagunde on the left. I worked with him on another show. Another puppet show, Lost on Earth.
I don't know. They all look alike.
That's you, James, as the puppet.
Yeah.
And now this is my nephew leaning on the water cooler. I tried to get him in several episodes and
Reginald Levy
kept getting shot down by the network.
I love how you go ballistic here, James. Great.
I like that they're all high-fiving.
It's payback time.
Weird decision is that he actually is a sock in that case. Whose idea was? I don't remember us discussing that, but he really was.
But we must all learn to tolerate and even celebrate our differences. Whether you're flesh, fleece, purple, plaid, or even Chinese.
Uncomfortable silence. It's funny.
Let's do a little role reversal.
There was talk of changing the voice. I think we brought actors in to dub over Aben Mitchell, and again, it was just like, guys, you know what? It's funny. Leave it alone. You can't beat that voice.
And this was one of the most puppeteers we ever had on a show. We brought in a lot of people to work on this. It was great to see all the puppets together in these big group shots that come up after this.
And so every time you see a gathering like that, you have to imagine that these sets are 4 feet off the ground, and there is a large trench with 8 to 10 people in there, each of them with their own television monitor and microphone. And I think so many people seem surprised to know that puppeteers also do the voices of their characters. They usually assume it's animation and that the voices are separate, which is often not the case.
But what's so brilliant about this is that every movement reinforces the psychology of the character. So I don't see how you could ever have a voice and then somebody else manipulating, particularly when there's so few physical things on the puppet to express character and emotion.
Right.
Okay. Now, what are some of
Now, Dan, I never understood that. Were we all excited because we wanted to hit Alison, or we all liked her? And
The
wanted
idea
to...
was that everybody wanted a chance to yell at her, and this confused Sarah as well. Everybody went through sort of character arcs as the writers were trying to figure out who these characters were, and as the actors were trying to find them. I know this is an example for Bob of one where his character changed shortly after this. And for Sarah, I remember her, I think actually at the point where Warren is feeling her up, which is coming up soon, I kind of remember a cut being called, and Sarah just kind of had this look on her face, and she's like, I just don't get, who I am. Am I just an adversary for Eugene, and am I just somebody that all the puppets are to be hated and score off of? What is my thing? And I think eventually we kind of found... I'm sorry, Dina's so funny. We kind of found a thing for her and Eugene as being sort of this two-headed character, like the mom and dad of the show, and they started sharing responsibility as opposed to being at odds.
The interesting thing is, Danny, after this episode, there was a change in Jack, and I found a way to make it, having been as a result of this episode, that there actually was a change in him. And I know the change came from above rather than from within, but I actually sort of like the fact of just going back to playing him as sort of a Jekyll and Hyde character.
Yeah.
His character on the show was so warm and naive and everything, and then his actual persona, who he is, was much more brutal. But I actually used this episode to transition into a kinder, gentler Junction Jack.
There is a resolution at the end for him, and I think we could also probably suppose that his doctor prescribed some good meds for him as well to help him deal with the stress.
Now, Gil.
Yes. Well, I'm sorry for all those things I said. Calling you lint balls and everything. I didn't mean it.
All together.
I want to point out James's hands here. He's in Dr. Aben Mitchell.
My first show, I got the most hand jobs.
Nice.
Thank you.
Question a lot of people ask me is what it's like playing opposite puppets. And the amazing thing in this show for me was once we got rolling, and even when we were off camera, it was so easy to speak to these puppets as full-fledged characters and react to them as characters. There was no sense that you were talking to a collection of yarn.
And that would continue when cut was called, right?
Absolutely.
Which is, why that stuff in some senses was almost more interesting, because we'd be on a coffee break and the puppets would be talking to you.
Sometimes it's just
most
hard
of you
to
guys
stop,
just could not shut up.
Yeah.
Actually.
It's just so fun that you keep the continuity of those characters, and plus all the puppeteers are either underneath the stages or behind stuff, so you really get to be separate and only interact with the characters.
Yeah, and continuing to play was the only way to keep from getting fatigued.
Sometimes for me, it's like I'll do a scene and I kind of fuck it up, and the only way to really redeem myself is to, crack up the crew and keep going.
You love your mama, Greg?
You're not gonna hurt her if I say yes, are you?
That's
we just had an
That's
example.
one of my favorite lines, but really silly.
Oh, this is great.
This is a fabulous flashback.
Cue sepia.
So did my dad. We were poor. I mean, we didn't have a double wide or anything, but...
That was a Bob improv. We were poor, we didn't have a double wide. He did that in the booth.
And one day I came home early from a scout meeting. I just won a merit badge for marksmanship.
I think it's interesting that you hear the sweet Junction Jack before all of this trauma.
Yes.
And that's when I saw him.
That, I believe, is a Mike Mitchell design.
Yes.
I remember the original drawing for that guy. Came out great.
Is that James doing
Yeah,
doing
I had
googly
fun
eyes?
sleeping with her. She was really nice.
Drew, you did the original drawing of Tardy, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I'm back on my script.
I remember looking at that and everyone just loved it.
They don't even retract the awning.
I know, that was the gag.
After that, I was known as the boy whose mom ran off with a puppet.
I remember this being very comfortable.
Picnic in the Deep South in the 60s.
Yeah, anytime puppets actually sit on things or standing on things, and sofas, chairs, floors, it's really...
There's a very uncomfortable
There's a lot of
really hard to
furniture with
do.
holes in it somewhere around the Fox lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan probably got the brunt of it being in the sink and being under the stage the most. But there was a great shot with that James did down in the sewer. It was in an actual sewer.
That's right.
With
To do
Rochester.
Rochester selling star maps
That's
at
in
the
Rabbit
side of the
Redux.
road.
Yeah.
He was supposed to have. I was supposed to assist him on the hands, and they said, maybe we can do it with just James down there. And I said, yeah, it's probably a good idea. Why don't
But the
we just have
worst,
James
the
do
worst
it?
thing about it
Working
was,
in the shitter.
he gets, a car's supposed to go by and splash water on him, but being in that sewer, there's literally no escape from the water. So the puppet got soaked. But I remember, James, you were soaked. And like they had to dry off Rochester, but they were like,
Take
James,
6."
you can just stay wet, can't you?
Yeah, but you were so happy to have Rochester back. You would have gone through that sewer.
Please, just give me a puppet.
I'll just go out there and I'll tell everybody that I was the one who did it. I really am sorry that your mama left you for a puppet gigolo.
I always expected that the first big problem with the show would be a workman's comp thing for carpal tunnel syndrome for about 8 of you.
Don't you remember there was like a week-long epidemic of people falling through the floor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the best thing. We had a whole big safety meeting, and then right at the end of the safety meeting, I went through it.
Yes.
And everybody freaked out, and I was just like, I'm okay. That was really stupid.
The original ending to this episode is in the deleted scenes section, where Jack does not learn his lesson and calls Susan a sock, I think.
Susan, of all people.
Hi, I'm Dr. Aben Mitchell. To learn
I love
more
that sweater.
about anti-puppetism in the workplace,
I think we asked specifically for a Cosby sweater.
or visit us on the web at www.antipuppetism.
Did they ever set up a website for this, Dan? If you go there?
No,
Is there-
but I would love it if someone would, please.
So here's something for all of you. Oh, we get outtakes?
These did not air originally because Fox would sort of say, coming up next on Fox.
Yeah.
Come see a bunch of people in a bunch of cars get chased by a bunch of animals out in the middle of the street. Children being chased by large automobiles and untrained wild animals. Next on Fox.
Malcolm finds out his parents have been turned into peanuts.
And after that, a contest to see who's the ugliest fat bastard in America. And then we're going to give him extensive plastic surgery to make him the funniest happy bastard all about South Africa.
That's the show, folks.